Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I had a question come in from a viewer. They wanted to know how to do a service on a Penn 209 or any Penn reel for that matter without the disassembly. And a lot of times you'll see me working on these reels and I'll take every screw out, I'll take every piece and part out, and I'll do the internal inspection, I'll do the gear services, I'll do the drag washers and the like. But this person is just asking for a superficial general service. How do you oil it and maintain it without getting too deep into this? So that's what I'm going to show you today. So there are a couple of key elements, whether it's a level wind reel or it's the conventional reel, like the Long Beach reel or the Jig Master, that enable you to get to critical operating pieces without a full disassemble. So when you look at the moving parts, those are the ones that typically need to be lubricated. And we have a bearing in the back here that we can take off and lubricate. We have a side bearing here for the worm gear that we can lubricate. We have a pawl that we can take off, but I'll show you how to do it without taking it off, since that's trying to get to it. And we have a gear sleeve here that does need to be oiled, and Penn would recommend oiling that to keep that from seizing. And I've noticed on a lot of the newer reels, Jig Masters in particular, if they're left too long and the grease dries, they do tend to seize. So let's just take a quick look here, see what we can do to help out, and see how far we can go with this. So let's start with the bearings. So some of the products you should use as you generally do your service. Get a general cleaning agent. In this case it's Purple Power. It's a concentrated cleaner degreaser. If you have grease and crud and grime that's built up along the reel, just give it a squirt, wash it down with that. It is a degreaser, so don't go crazy with it, because if you're not taking the reel apart, it may get inside and weaken some of the greases that you have in there. But again, if you have some scales or things on the side plates, it's a good thing to use. You're going to want to use a reel grease for some of the bearings that we can take off. You're going to want to use a reel oil, like a Penn Precision Reel Oil or Reel X, which is an aftermarket. And if you want, again, from cleaning and general lubrication and penetration, use a penetrating oil like a WD-40, or in this case it's a store brand, but all of those have pretty much the same characteristics. All right, let's get started then. First thing we're going to do, I'm going to pull this bearing on the side plate here, and I'm going to put a dab of the grease on there. I'm going to use Penn Precision Reel Grease for this, but any fishing reel grease will do. And I'm just going to grab a little bit, and we can just put that there, right over the hole. That will enable you to get to the spool. And you have a clicker gear here that if you were to take the side plate off, you would try and put a little drop of oil in. So we're just going to try and put it in there. There is a hole between the two, so I'm just going to flood that and just move that back and forth a little bit to get that done. So side bearing here. And again, we're going to try and do this without too much in terms of the taking pieces and parts off. Now, this is your pawl assembly and your worm assembly. You want to make sure that's clean. So the first thing I recommend doing, again, with that WD-40 is a good idea, or the penetrating oil, just give a quick shot on there, let it sink in a little bit, and then I like to take a paper towel, bundle it up, and reel the reel. Oh, I got the clicker on there, but reel the reel. Watch your fingers so that you don't get trapped in there. But if you rotate the reel, that's going to help get some of the junk off that may have been in there. So you want to make sure it's clean like this is. And then I have a little pick just to make sure that we get all the stuff behind there. But make sure that's clean. There's no sense lubricating it if it's dirty. It's just going to clog up. So there's something in here. Just got that out. Okay, and then some reel oil. And again, whether you use the Penn reel oil or the Reel X, just put a couple of drops on the worm gear. And then from the pawl standpoint, now if you want to get adventurous, pull that screw. That'll be the pawl back there. But if you don't want to get adventurous, there's a place where the sleeve joins the worm gear. And I like the Reel X for this because it's got that little bit of a nozzle. Just throw a shot right on that worm gear, and then crank it so that it works its way into that pawl assembly. So we can do that. Next one up then would be the side holder for the worm gear. You'll be a little bit careful here, but you want to do the same thing that we just did. Grab that, take that out because it is a kind of a bearing holder there. Same assembly sort of as the side plate. And when you put it back in, that's the only thing. If you're not real mechanically inclined, you got to make sure that it seats properly, because sometimes it'll be off center, and you'll know right away if it's not seated properly because your line wind will not turn. Okay, with that then, the other one is the handle screw. And you can do this two ways, and I never had much luck, but you can push this center pin in here where it says oil. I use a pin. You can use an awl or something else. Push that button down. Just throw a little bit of oil on top. You'll see it goes seeking in there. And just, that's it. That's basically it. I also like to throw just a little bit of oil behind the free spool lever. I do notice that that's a place where this does crank up. And if you really wanted to get adventurous, you could throw a little bit of oil around behind the spool there to try and get into some of those gears. If you wanted to do that, pull this bearing up as much as you can. Pull the spool out so that you do have a little bit of break in there, and then you can put a little bit of oil behind there as well. Again, it's not as good as taking the whole thing off, but you do have the jack and the yoke and the spring assemblies back there, and if you do it that way, you can get some. Just remember to tighten that spool up afterwards. So without too much effort, and with one tool, the pin, you can pretty much lube the moving parts of this reel. Again, it's not the same as taking it off and taking it off piece by piece, but for a quick tune-up, to make sure that you have the gear sleeve, the trip lever, the line guide assembly, the worm, the pawl, and the back end spool bearing, it's sufficient enough that you know, those are the critical failure efforts where points where pieces move. And if you just want to do that without getting real adventurous, just go ahead and follow those instructions, and you'll be able to keep your reel running in between major tune-ups. And the major tune-up I would consider is when it's time to replace the drags. And when you take the drags out, that's when you're going to take the whole reel apart. You're going to do the full service at that point in time. You'll clean all those internal gears. You'll make sure you have fresh drags. You'll remove any corrosion and built up grime and grease inside, and you'll restore the reel. But for interim services, what we did there is just fine. So I hope you learned from that. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like it. If you want to see more, please subscribe. Again, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for viewing.